Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Living with me, your host, Jared Warne. So, today is a bit of a different episode. It's more of a re upload. So, today, release of the podcast is the 9th anniversary of my granddad's passing. And I know quite a few of you may have listened to the podcast last year. I did in remembrance of my granddad, but there's quite a few new listeners who may not have noticed that episode, so I am doing a re-upload, and it is one of the probably proudest episodes I've done, and the most probably my favourite of them all, to be honest, because obviously on a personal level, getting to talk about my granddad's work with spirit and his mediumship, and yeah, I think with the day it is, I just think it'd be nice to re-upload this and celebrate his life, which I'll be doing today. Not to put it on too somber, but going to Burnley today, and put some flowers on the grave for him and my nana. I got a little gift to put on the grave as well. But we had some amazing experiences recently in regards to my granddad. So I want to give you a bit of an update on that, of course. So for those who may not have seen, last Thursday we did a table tipping with Denise, our medium, a resident medium with Paranormal Living, and she obviously took control of this circle we did. So there was myself, Bob. He didn't go on the table, but he did some filming and got pictures and stuff while we were live streaming on Facebook. So you can go back if you haven't seen it. It will be on YouTube as well, just after this weekend. But we had an amazing experience. So, like I said, we had Denise, Bob, who was doing the filming. We had Heather, who goes to the class which Denise runs with myself. Denise's daughter, Zoe, who is also a medium. She will be coming on the podcast in the not too near future for a little interview and let us know her story. And Susan, who has been on quite a few investigations with us as well. So, when you're doing an experiment like this, you need to have people you trust with you. Who aren't going to push the table, aren't going to elaborate things, what was going on. So, obviously, we started the table tipping, and honestly, guys, it was absolutely phenomenal. So, my granddad did come through. Like you say, I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown into what happened before this episode does come back on. And you could feel the table, you could feel the energy on the table. So, for those who may have done it, who are listening to the podcast, you know what an amazing experience it is. But for those who may not have experienced this, so we could feel the table pulsating, vibrating. You could feel the energy, or even at some points, like someone to pull it. You can just feel that pull of energy. So we just had our sort of fingertips on the table. So obviously we started the experimental night and calling out to see obviously if there's anyone with us. And Denise started linking in to spirit, and then we got the spirit, who was the first one on, to spell out the name, and spelled out John. So we knew it was Grandad, and we said then, show us which way for yes, which way for no, which it did. So I'm like, Grandad, is this you? Boom, went to yes. And you could feel the table pulling. So we end up saying, if you want to go, we'll go. And then all of a sudden, you see the table running and it's going round in circles. And this is like a beautician table, where you get your nails done kind of thing. That's what we were using. And the thing was going round in circles, and it was running to the point where Denise was like, stop the table. Because obviously it was going that fast. And I think it's twice it happened. We were going around the room. Obviously it's all on the footage. If you want to take a look at it, it was an amazing experience. And then once we got the table to calm down, we then proceeded into asking questions, and I got to communicate with my granddad, which was absolutely phenomenal, because he was a very, very special person to me, and we were very, very close. And when you get that confirmation back, and the evidence with it, it's you just know it's what an amazing feeling. And even for people watching as well, some people did get messages as well, and Denise was giving out the messages as well as the table moving. There was so much going on, and to bring evidence to people, even those who may not have got a message, but they got something out of it, and we showed people that the spirit world is around us, and it was, honestly, guys, it was phenomenal. So, big thank you to my granddad for coming through, obviously Denise for taking control of it, and obviously everyone who watched and joined in with us, because yeah, it's something I'll never forget, and we're definitely going to do something along that lines again in the future. So let's get into this week's episode. For those who may not have listened to the original, when we posted it on my granddad's anniversary last year, I felt it's something I wanted to do because I mentioned my granddad. I feel he never got the credit for his work with spirit. He was a fantastic medium, and I'm not just saying that because he's my granddad, but he was fantastic. And he'd do anything for anyone. He'd give you the shirt off his back. He was that kind of person, and he, like I mentioned, he meant a lot to us. He was like a saint to the family. He was the person you go to if you ever had any issues, any questions, and he'd always have the answer. And last thing in regards to the episode, the first part is me reading as a book. So my granddad did some writings, and we have it all on the notepad, which he did. So I was reading word for word what he put about his life and his experiences. So you will hear that, and then of course you will hear his voice as well through the course of the episode, and a bit of a chat about things. So I do hope you enjoy.
John Warne, Lord officially vowed eternity. These are the personal experiences and writings of John Warne, spiritualist clairvoyant and spiritual healer. Born Saturday the 3rd of May 1930 in Burnley, Lancashire, to Walter and Anne Warne. John was the youngest of three. He had two older brothers, Luke and Walter. John had a strong loving upbringing with English and Irish relatives. His mum, Anne, used to read the tea leaves and was a medium. John wrote, "It all started in 1935 at the age of 5 years old. My parents went to the cinema and left me with my uncle and my eldest brother Luke. Me being the youngest was put to bed first. My uncle then shut the door, left the landing light on for me, and went downstairs to look after Luke. But I had the feeling I wasn't alone and the feeling of being unloved, as children do. It was at this moment this man came into my bedroom. No sound, he just stood there, looking at me, and didn't speak. After a short while, he then left the room. He had long hair, dressed all in white, and had a rope around his waist, which was hanging down by his side. Who was this man? This man was Jesus. I know it was him, as I have seen him more than once. Teachings. In my teachings, I had two nuns that taught me a great deal, but I also had plenty of spirit friends helping me along the way. The two nuns, one was Mother Superior, whose face you couldn't see, and also a younger nun who always had a smile on her face, laughing and joking. This went on for some time. Then one day a nun turned up at my house. I invited her in. She knew my name, John. I had never seen her before. She was also on her own, which at the time was very strange, to say the least. After 15 minutes of talking to the nun, it was time for her to leave. As we got up and walked to the door, she said to me, "Keep your faith." And just at that moment, she disappeared right in front of my eyes. And she came to me to let me know I was ready to work and fully trained to do my mediumship. It was around this time I started spending more time at Burnley Spiritualist Church. And one day the medium didn't turn up. After waiting for some time, the committee then asked the congregation would anybody be willing to take the service. All of a sudden, everyone turned around and looked at me. I was then asked to take the service. And it was from that moment on where my platform work started. Throughout the 70s and 80s, as well as the private sittings and churches, my granddad was working with the police on numerous investigations. This is from his own writings. In helping the police into the Yorkshire Ripper murders, I told them when he would do number 9, the month and the date. They were correct. Not long after, 2 Sheffield police officers came to see me about it. I told them that there was no sex involved in these crimes, that they would not catch him till Christmas, and he will have killed 13, and they would have to count the one at Preston. Another murder I told the police about was a lady who was on her way home from a party, attacked and killed. After 3 weeks, no arrest had been made, so it was time to do something. I called the police. I told them that there were 5 people involved, but only one did the killing. I gave them a full description of him, the pub he drank in, and what they would find in his backyard. Not too long after they made an arrest, everything I said was correct. There was a murder investigation going on in Atlanta, USA. I contacted the FBI telling him that one of the murder victims was buried under the concrete. I described the building where the victim was buried and also gave them a full description of the gentleman who was the murderer and telling him that he was a photographer. Again, the information I gave was correct. Hauntings. I was asked to go to a lady's flat because of what she said, that there was a white lady that walks around the flat and she's worried about her son and herself. She told me that there had been tenants before her that had left due to the haunting. When I went there was a large fireplace and a very wide staircase. I picked up that it was a large farmhouse in the 16th century, and the man that lived there was a cavalier, and he went off to fight the Roundheads, and unfortunately never returned. His wife later died of a broken heart, and she became earthbound. In her way, she was still waiting for him to return. While I was there, the lady of the flat asked would I like a cup of tea, but before she could make it, this cavalier appeared at the foot of the stairs, just looking at me for around 30 seconds. Then I could hear him walking upstairs. It sounded like heavy riding boots on bare floorboards. So I told the lady what I had seen, and he wanted me to go upstairs. As I got upstairs, I saw there were 3 rooms. I went in the first room, nothing. As I moved to the second room, again, nothing. But then I got to the third room. I was taken back. It was as if there was a plastic sheet across the door, and I couldn't get in the room. I then forced myself in the room. As I got in there, I saw the lady who was in spirit. She was crying. There were 3 gentlemen with her as well, who were consoling her and calming her down. It was at that moment the cavalier appeared again. He came to her and took her by the hand. And at that moment, the light came and they went off together. What was needed was someone like me to be able to bring the 2 worlds together and reunite them. This story is very different. I was asked to go to this house where water came through the bedroom floor twice a day at the same time for about a minute. They had had the gas company and the water board come out, but they couldn't find anything to cause this, as there were no pipes under the floorboard. They wasn't sure if it was spirit, but it was. After receiving a phone call, I went to the house. As I got there, I spoke to the man of the house, and I asked him what time does the water come through. He looked at his watch and said now. At that moment, the water comes pouring through. Then it stopped. So I took a walk upstairs to where the water was coming from. I then saw a gentleman sat there, still had his glasses on. He had lived there all his life, until the day he died. I told the man of the house that the reason he was causing the problems is because he didn't like children, and he wanted the family to leave. It was at that moment I asked for the light to come and collect him and take the gentleman to the other side. And from that moment, they never had a problem again. So there are a few things that I thought I'd share with you all from his own personal writings and his personal book he did, like I say, start to write. And, you know, with this podcast, I'm going to make it into a podcast as well. So it will be uploaded onto the social media pages as well. But, you know, we have so much stuff which I can't wait to share with you all and show you, you know, even some stuff we not necessarily included in this episode, you know, like the letter from the FBI, you know, when my granddad spoke about the Atlanta murders and, you know, plenty of other stuff it's had to do with his mediumship and, you know, cutouts and things like that. So that will all be uploaded in due course, and like I say, I can't wait to share it with you. So moving forward now, I'd just like to add this bit in. And, you know, about a month or 2 ago, I did interview Denise Kershaw, who is a medium and a very well-respected one at that. And she now helps me with my development. But one thing my granddad did for her was help her. You know, he took her under his wing, he took her to the spiritualist churches, you know, sort of brought her into that side of working with spirit, you know, which she then become the resident medium at Colne Spiritualist Church, which is not too far from Burnley. And, you know, the fact that he impacted her life and helped her, you know, I think it's amazing. And here's a bit of something she said about him.
You did ask me earlier if I did look up at any mediums. Yes, I did. Your granddad.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Because your granddad... Whoa, I've gone all cold now. Your granddad's giving us a visit here. Your granddad was the one what got me going in the first place. He took me round with him to do churches, so I used to watch him, and he got me up and going, and that's how I started doing my churches.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that, yeah.
And now I'm in your class as well.
Yeah, see how it comes down.
Yeah.
I reckon your granddad brought you
Yeah,
to
definitely.
me. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Oh, you made me go after Yeah, so it's like, yeah.
So that was a bit of what Denise said in the interview about my granddad, which I thought would be nice to share with you. And, you know, for me, she did, as she mentioned then, that she believes my granddad brought me to her. And I 100% believe that. Because since being with her class now, which is around 12 months, maybe just a bit longer, I've come on so much more with my development, and I now feel like I'm back on my spiritual pathway. And listening back to parts of my granddad reading, there was something, you know, I come across, and I feel like it's very poignant at this point. So I'd just like to play this for you.
I'm also looking here as if like a magic wand. You don't often see this. And what it is, as you see things at the moment and there's nothing there, the magic wand comes about and of course changes it completely as such. In other words, it's like turning over a new leaf.
You know, finding that makes so much sense, especially at the point where, you know, where I have been just before Denise's class. Like I say, I was in the class I was in, it seemed to go a bit stale, and the development seemed to sort of take a step back, and didn't feel like I was getting to where I should have been. And after being there for 2.5, 3 years, you know, I thought that I probably should have been further on than I was. And then obviously finding Denise's class and thing, you know, that just, like I said, just feels so poignant and makes so much sense. I'd like to talk about the last service my granddad did. You know, as I mentioned in the podcast, 60 plus years he did, working at different churches, you know, all starting back at Burnley Spiritualist Church. The medium didn't turn up and he ended up taking the service. But the last service he did was at Clitheroe Spiritualist Church. It's an absolutely fantastic church. I've been there so many times over the years, growing up with my granddad. Beautiful place. But an emotional service, you know, everyone knew that was my granddad's last one, and he'd never be working the churches again. And with the service, I was asked to perform a song, which I did. And it was a gospel song called Where No One Stands Alone. Very fitting for obviously the service and things. And my granddad then took the service, and what can I say? His evidence was so accurate, you know. And one of the things what stands out for me about how my granddad worked, he'd never stand on a rostrum. He'd always work the floor. And, you know, he always said, I'm no better than anybody else, I'm no higher up than anyone else. And then he'd walk up to you. He'd work the floor, like I said. He'd walk up to you and talk to you, face to face. And my granddad wasn't one of these who used to ask questions or anything. He'd literally just give you the message. And another thing about my granddad's services, they were never sad. He was always happy. The energy was always... It was always brilliant. You were so relaxed and everyone was happy. There was laughter. You know, it was... You just give off this glow. That's the best way to explain it. And that was the service. Service ends. As usual, you get your cup of tea, get your biscuits and things. And, you know, the amount of people coming up to him at the end, saying how much they enjoyed it and thanking him. And, you know, there were some people there who'd seen him for I don't know how many years. You know, and it's just lovely to, you know, look back. And even at the time, sat there watching it of all these people thanking him and how much he appreciated what he did. I think, you know, it's absolutely fantastic. So back in August of 2012, my granddad did give me a private reading. And, you know, I still listen to it to this day. It's backed up every way you can possibly think of. And within this reading, obviously there's a lot of information. And he did tell me about one of my spirit guides. So I'd like to share this with you now.
You see, where spirit is concerned, you have a gentleman with you, obviously, who was a man of authority in his day, and what he has is what we call officer's stick, it's authority. And obviously what he's doing there is he's guiding you from one place to another to make sure whatever's promised you of a spiritual nature will be fulfilled, so you won't miss out on that at all.
So there is a few things I'd like to share with you from this reading. But before I do that, I'd just like to mention some of these experiences my granddad did have. Around this time of 2012, you know, the activity in his house become more prominent. You know, everything, from noises and spirit being around him, but making themselves more aware that they are around him. One of the main things I do remember was my nana. She passed away back in 2007, but it was around this time, as I mentioned, she was making herself more aware that she's around him. On so many occasions, at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was always 3 o'clock, he'd hear her. He'd hear her calling upstairs, and he used to shout back down at her. And, maybe looking back, it was the start of ready for his transition. One of the strangest phenomena that did happen, which I experienced myself while I was with my granddad, was the phone used to ring. So in his bedroom, he used to have a phone upstairs, but it never worked. It had probably been there 20 years or something. And like I say, it'd been disconnected for I don't know how long. But the phone used to ring, and then he used to pick it up, and it'd be a dead line, as if someone's on the other side, but they wasn't saying anything. And this happened on so many occasions. And then we went to Clitheroe Spiritualist Church, which is, like I mentioned, where my granddad did his last service, and there was a medium on there. And my granddad had asked the medium, obviously, about what was going on. And he said to my granddad, ask him who it is, just speak to him. And then it happened again. My granddad answered the phone and said, who is it? And they said, how did you know I was coming? And that was it. And then one night I was sat with my granddad watching TV. He dozed off in his chair. Then all of a sudden he just shut up. And he picked up the phone. And I was like, okay. And he went, listen. So I got up off the sofa and went over to the phone. And it was a dead line, as if someone was on the other end of it, but not saying anything. It was really bizarre. I've never experienced that since. But it was that exact thing what my granddad was constantly experiencing about the phone. It was very bizarre. And like you say, the phone didn't even ring because I was sat there watching telly. But yeah, it was a very strange phenomenon, that. And another thing I would like to mention is I always had a guitar at my granddad's. It was always in the corner. And he told me one day as I turned up, he told me about the guitar playing through the night. It was a song from a film. I can't remember what the film was called now. But it was a song from a film, from a Western film, if I remember correctly. And the guitar had been playing by itself, which had happened a few times as well. So again, it was all around these upcoming mums to him, unfortunately passing away. And all these experiences, obviously, were happening more frequent and more common. But now I'd like to go back to the reading. Obviously, I'm sharing with you. And in this part, he now goes on to tell me about some significant news coming, and also about the 5th being a significant day.
What I can actually see here, basically, is a massive type bird, and it's on the ground, but it's about to take off. That's news, which is actually coming, which is also quite good. And they also give you the number 5. So wherever the 5th in a date is related, you may find things happen more frequently then than in any other sort of date as such.
Further into the reading, he then goes on to mention about the 5th of November, Bonfire Night.
November, round about the 5th of November, which I can see the bonfire, which just gives you a marker. It also indicates again that things, I'm watching all the rockets and things going up, which is an indication of an ideal-like situation where yourself is concerned.
So at the time, obviously, I didn't think out of it. Use that as a marker for obviously something happening. And then fast forward to the 5th of November, which obviously is the unfortunate day my granddad did pass away. The last time I did see him was in the afternoon. And he was okay. He didn't really seem to tell. He was a bit quiet, I guess. He was eating his dinner. And I said to him, I'm going to see the bonfire tonight, see the fireworks, and then I'll come and put the bins out, which was always my job. So he said, yeah, no worries. So that was it. And then obviously went to Manchester that night. And as I come back, I used to live at the end of the street to him. And I walked down the street, went to see him. And it was that unfortunate time that I found him and that he'd passed away. But looking back at that evening, it was a crazy evening to say the least, as you can imagine. But, one of the things my granddad always said to us, he said, you'll know when I've gone. And I was the first one to find him. Then my brother randomly turned up out of the blue. Like he said, no one had rang anyone. And this is while I'm trying to help my granddad. But some of the things what did happen on the night were a bit strange, out of the ordinary. You know, at my house, my sister was there with my eldest nephew, and they didn't know at this point that he'd passed away. She was just watching him. And, you know, while everything's going on at my granddad's house, he walks into the kitchen and then comes running out and said he's seen Grandad, and then like, there's a man in the kitchen. You know, and then he also mentioned about the toast being in the toaster, which obviously we found out they were. My granddad had been making toast. You know, but my nephew, he was only about three or four at the time of obviously this all happened. You know, so it was a bit weird for him to come out with some of this stuff he did do. You know, but one thing I will say, me and my granddad, you know, we had a very close bond. To be honest, he was more like a father to me. You know, we were that close, and, you know, from, as I mentioned, from a young age, you know, travelled to the churches with him. You know, he opened my eyes to the world of spirit, the afterlife. And, you know, even though it's been 8 years since he did pass, you know, it's still not any easier, and it's still, you get them days where you miss him. I just think, if anything, you just learn how to cope with it. You know, it never goes away. But as I've always said, always say on the podcast and things, and always do say in life, you know, I do know he's always around me. He's guiding me on my spiritual pathway. And, you know, I do hope to be able to continue, like I say, from where he left off. But for me, more than anything, is about his legacy. His legacy for me is how he touched so many people. You know, his work with spirit was strong, and, you know, his messages were so accurate. And, you know, the fact that people, as I mentioned, still remember him to this day. You know, my brother was up Townley in Burnley, where he lives, and talking to this lady, and then all of a sudden they get into a conversation about my granddad, and, you know, she remembers having readings of him from years and years ago. And, you know, things like that, and going to churches, and when I've been back to Clitheroe Church, and, you know, they remember my granddad, and people come up to me and talk to me about it and give their memories they have of him. You know, I think, you know, what a testament to him. The fact that they still think about him to this day. You know, he's been gone all these years, and even the people, you know, you meet who've had readings of him like 30 years ago, you know, still remember it, and he still had an impact in their life, and they still talk about it. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. And like I say, what a testament to him and to his work. You know, it's absolutely fantastic. This has been the story of my granddad's life, John Warne, May 3rd, 1930 to the 5th of November, 2012.